but use my intellect to paint you a picture of progressive tax policy. Now, look, I know a lot of you liberals want me to spend the next 3 hours pounding the desk, 100 days this, and go through all the things that have happened or have not happened, parsing and nitpicking and whatever. But I'm not going to do that. But what I want to do for you, and I want to include you liberals in this one, is I have come up with the 100-day tax plan to help out President Obama with raising revenue. Now, I ran some numbers today, just jotted them down, just to be fair. We heard during the election that it was time to return to the Clinton-era tax rates. We heard that some Americans who did not like the idea of paying higher taxes, we heard their patriotism questioned. When we were told for the past 8 years we couldn't question anyone's patriotism. We have heard people say the rich don't pay their fair share, they don't pay enough, the more you make, the more they should take. Well, going through here, starting with the Communist Manifesto. Oh, there he goes, going for the Communist Manifesto. Just hold on a second. Just work with me on this. Here we have the 10 pillars of communism. Now, I'm going to add in a little bit of Marx, a little bit of Roosevelt, a little bit of Carter, a little bit of the Swedish economic theory, and a whole lot of Andrew Wilkow. Now, listen to this very carefully. These are the 10 pillars of communism. Number 1, abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. Number 2, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. Number 3, abolition of the rights of inheritance. Number 4, confiscation of the property of all emigrants and rebels. Number 5, centralization in the credit of the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. Number 6, centralization of means of communication and transport in the hands of the state. Number 7, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, bringing into cultivation of wastelands the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with a common plan. Number 8, equal liability of all to labor, establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. Number 9, combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of the distinction between the town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country. Number 10, free education for all children in public schools, abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, combination of education with industrial production. Now, what we're going to do is go over which of these have come to fruition, which are on their way, and maybe which ones are seemingly a little outdated. But I want you to look at this. The Obama administration, along with the Democrats, have claimed that those who make $250,000 or more are, in fact, the wealthiest of Americans. The highest marginal tax rate. Now, follow this one. And I want you guys in there to get me as many liberal calls as you can. If any of them have the intellectual capacity to keep up with me and understand this stuff. Highest marginal tax rate kicks in at $250,000. That's 39.5% of one's income going directly to the federal government in the name of fairness. Now, I want you to imagine 3 rectangles. A large rectangle, a medium rectangle, and a small rectangle. I'm going to do this all for you. The bottom large rectangle are low-income Americans down to the most impoverished. The middle triangle, middle-sized triangle, actually in the middle, is the middle class. The small rectangle, on top of the middle rectangle are the super rich. Now, if you want to strengthen the middle class, you take the small triangle, rectangle that represents the largest amount of wealth, and you make it responsible for the bottom rectangle, which represents the largest amount of poverty, or the largest number of people with the least amount of money versus the smallest number of people with the largest amount of money. The way to do this is, and to protect the middle class, if you want a truly progressive or graduated income tax, is to have the highest marginal tax rate kick in at 39.5% with a millionaire's tax, starting at 1% per million. Now follow this. At $1 million, a person earning $1 million would pay 39.5% plus 1%, bringing their taxes to the federal government at 40.5%. At $10 million, they would be up to 50.5%. At $50 million, they'd be at 90.5%. Now, at 90.5%, you're still taking home, before state and local taxes, almost $5 million. You're still rich, and you've got it coming in next year, don't you? And if you're a Hollywood celebrity, you're probably making this 2-3 times a year, so no big deal. This is the problem. The super rich on the left don't like the idea of their socioeconomic class actually paying for all the problems of the super poor. You see, numerically, the super rich are few, but their wealth is great. Numerically, according to their own statements, the super poor are large in numbers, but little in money. The middle class is a large number of people, or a medium number of people, I should say, with a medium amount of money. So what happens when you have the highest marginal income set at $250 with an eye on bringing in more revenue? I mean, if these super rich lefties really want progressive taxation, let's give them what they want. Let's tax Oprah at 90%. Let's tax Warren Buffett at 90%. Let's tax George Soros at 90%. Let's tax Sean Penn at 90%. Now, you might have a network anchor like a Keith Olbermann making $4 million a year, which he does. 43.5% doesn't sound like an unfair tax rate. So if these people believe in a true progressive tax system, let's see them put their money where their mouths are. And that would protect the middle class. In other words, it would shield the people in the middle from the burdens of the bottom, which would be paid for by the people at the top, still leaving them in the category of wealthy. Because remember, the millionaire's penalty would only start at $1 million and would only be 1% more than the technical highest marginal tax rate. So the place to be, I guess, would be between $250,000 and $999,000. At $1 million, you lose 1%. At $2 million, you lose 2%. But that would be fair, wouldn't it? Mr. and Mrs. Liberal, Mr. and Mrs. Democrat, to take the class of people at the very top who are few in number but large in wealth, make them responsible for the super poor because they are large in number and little in wealth. So why don't you do that and leave the middle alone? I mean, you believe in strengthening the middle class, you can do that. You can simply bypass the responsibility of the middle class by raising 1% per million on the super rich, leaving out the middle class, allowing the super poor to benefit, because the belief is, on the left, that one person cannot rise economically without deflating someone else. In other words, to become marginally rich, someone else has to become marginally poor, because there's a finite amount of wealth and an infinite number of people who need it but can't acquire it, when the reverse is actually true. There's an infinite amount of wealth and only a finite number of people. So if the Democrats want truly progressive taxation, I say we give it to them. You want zero liability voters? Well, make the zero liability voters the middle class. The poor don't earn anything worthy of taxation. The rich have so much. So why don't you bypass the middle, the people maybe at the second tier marginal tax rate, and just below the $1 million per 1%, leave them alone, and just tax from 1 million up, 1% per million, up to 50 million, which would give you about an approximate 90% tax rate, and then basically after 50 million, there are no more